The words hit me like a physical blow across my perfectly set dinner table. I am so excited to finally move into this beautiful house, Seraphina. My sister Magdalena beamed, raising her wine glass as if toasting her victory. Around the mahogany table that had belonged to our grandmother, my entire family nodded approvingly. My parents smiled. My brother Marcus clapped. Everyone knew something I apparently did not. The house I had been living in for 3 years, the house I had been paying the mortgage on the house where I had built my life, was no longer mine. Before we dive into this family betrayal story, I want to know where my incredible viewers are watching from tonight. Are you Team Justice or Team Forgiveness when it comes to family drama? Hit that like button. If you have ever felt betrayed by someone you trusted completely, and do not forget to subscribe, because this revenge story is about to get absolutely wild. Trust me, you will want to stick around for every shocking twist that is coming. The silence that followed Magdalena's announcement stretched for what felt like an eternity. I stared at her perfectly manicured fingers wrapped around the crystal wine glass. Our grandmother's crystal, and tried to process what she had just said. My mouth felt dry, my heart hammering against my ribs like it was trying to escape. "What did you just say?" I managed to whisper, though every person at the table heard me clearly. Magdalena's smile faltered slightly, but she maintained that sickeningly sweet expression she had perfected since childhood. "Oh, Seraphina, do not act so surprised. Mother told me you knew about the arrangements." I turned to look at my mother, Eleanor, whose perfectly applied lipstick could not hide the guilty purse of her lips. "What arrangements? What is she talking about?" My father, William, cleared his throat, that same pompous sound he made when he was about to deliver news he knew would devastate someone. "Seraphina, we need to discuss the house situation. There have been some financial complications with your mortgage payments." "Financial complications?" I practically shrieked. "I have never missed a single payment. I have been paying $1,500 every month for 3 years. That was when Marcus, my supposedly supportive older brother, decided to twist the knife. "Actually, Sarah, those payments were never going toward your mortgage. They were going into a family trust account that father established." The room began to spin. I gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles turning white against the dark wood. "That is impossible. I have bank statements. I have receipts. I have been sending money directly to the mortgage company." Eleanor finally spoke, her voice dripping with the condescending tone she had used when scolding me as a child. "Darling, you have been sending money to an account we set up to look like the mortgage company. We needed to test your commitment to homeownership before we could trust you with such a significant investment." "Test my commitment?" I could barely form the words. "I have been living here for 3 years. I renovated the kitchen, I painted every single room, I planted the garden." "Yes, and you did a lovely job," Magdalena interjected, her voice sickly sweet. "Which is why I am so grateful you prepared everything so beautifully for when I move in next month." The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound could have. These people, my own family, had been conspiring against me for 3 years. Every monthly payment I had scraped together, every sacrifice I had made to ensure I could afford what I believed was my mortgage, every dream I had built within these walls had been nothing but an elaborate deception. "So where is my money?" I demanded, my voice growing stronger despite the tremor in my hands. 36 months of $1,500 payments. That is $54,000. William had the audacity to look annoyed at my question. "That money was invested wisely in the family portfolio. Consider it your contribution to the family's overall financial stability." My contribution. I stood up so quickly my chair toppled backward, crashing to the hardwood floor with a sound that made everyone jump. "You stole $54,000 from me." "Do not be so dramatic, Seraphina," Eleanor sighed. "It is still family money. It is not as if we gave it to strangers. But you are giving my house to her." I pointed at Magdalena, who was examining her reflection in her phone screen as if this conversation bored her. "It was never your house," Marcus said matter-of-factly. "The deed has always been in father's name. You were essentially paying rent, though you were too naive to realize it." "Naive?" The word exploded from me. I trusted you. All of you, I believed I was building something for myself. Magdalena finally looked up from her phone. Oh, Seraphina, you are being so selfish. I am getting married next year, and Derek and I need somewhere to live. This house is perfect for us. You can find a nice little apartment somewhere. A nice little apartment. I could not believe what I was hearing. After you stole my money and my home, you want me to congratulate you and move into an apartment. No one stole anything, William said firmly. We made a business decision that benefits the family as a whole. Magdalena is the oldest daughter and she is getting married. It makes sense for her to have the family home. I am 28 years old. I am not a child who needs to be managed. Eleanor reached across the table as if to pat my hand, but I yanked it away. Sweetheart, you have always been impractical with money. Remember when you wanted to go to art school, we saved you from making that terrible financial mistake too. The memory hit me like another slap. When I was 18, I had been accepted to a prestigious art program with a partial scholarship. My parents had convinced me it was financially irresponsible that I should study business instead. I had trusted their guidance, changed my major, and spent 4 years miserable in classes I hated, all because I believed they wanted what was best for me. You have been controlling my life for 10 years, I realized aloud. The college decision, the career choices, the boyfriend you did not approve of, and now this. We have been protecting you from your own poor judgment, William replied coldly. And frankly, your reaction tonight proves we were right to handle your finances this way. I looked around the table at these people who shared my DNA, but clearly did not share my values. Marcus was nodding along with everything our parents said, probably hoping to secure his own position in the family hierarchy. Magdalena was back to scrolling through her phone, occasionally taking selfies with the ornate dining room as her background. Eleanor and William sat there looking righteous, as if they had performed some noble service by lying to me for 3 years. I want my money back, I said quietly. Every penny of it. That money has been invested, William repeated. It is not liquid cash sitting in an account somewhere. Then liquidate the investments. Absolutely not, Eleanor interjected. Those investments are for the family's future security. Whose family? I asked. Because apparently I am not part of it. The hurt in my voice must have been audible because for the first time that evening, Marcus looked uncomfortable. Sarah, you are being overly emotional about this. It is just a house. Just a house? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. This house where I thought I was building my future, where I have hosted every family gathering for 3 years, where I have created a home. You can create a home anywhere, Magdalena said without looking up from her phone. Derek and I have so many plans for redecorating. We are thinking of knocking out the wall between the kitchen and living room to create more of an open concept. She was talking about destroying the renovation I had spent months planning and executing the project that had drained my savings account and consumed my weekends for half a year. That was the moment I realized my family did not just disrespect me, they actively despised me. I was nothing more than free labor to them, someone to maintain their property and contribute financially while having no actual stake in anything. I need some air, I announced, walking toward the back door. Seraphina, do not storm off like a child, Eleanor called after me. We are not finished discussing this. Actually, we are finished, I replied without turning around. Because I am done being manipulated by people who are supposed to love me. I stepped onto the back porch I had built with my own hands and looked out at the garden where I had spent countless hours planting roses and vegetables and herbs. Every flower, every stone in the pathway, every piece of outdoor furniture represented hours of my life and dollars from my bank account. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Stop being so dramatic. We can work this out like adults. I deleted the message without responding. There was no working this out like adults because adults do not lie to their family members for 3 years. Adults do not steal $54,000. Adults do not manipulate someone into renovating a house just to give it to someone else. Standing there in the garden I had created, surrounded by the beauty I had built, I made a decision. My family wanted to play games with my life and my money. Fine. But they had made one crucial mistake. They had underestimated me completely. I did not sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table, my beautiful renovated kitchen table with my laptop open and a growing pile of documents spread around me. If my family thought I would quietly disappear into a small apartment while they enjoyed the fruits of my labor, they were about to learn how wrong they could be. The first step was understanding exactly what had been done to me. I logged into every financial account I had ever owned and began printing statements. 3 years of mortgage payments, all made to Hartwell Property Management, LLC. I had never questioned the company name because my father had told me it was the service company that handled payments for the mortgage lender. Now I realized that William had likely created this entity himself. At 4 in the morning, I found what I was looking for buried in the fine print of my original lease agreement, because that is what it had been apparently. A lease, not a mortgage application. But here was the interesting part. The lease was signed under fraudulent pretenses. I had signed it believing I was entering into a rent-to-own agreement that would lead to home ownership. The document clearly stated that I was working toward purchasing the property, not simply renting it indefinitely. By sunrise, I had compiled a folder thick enough to choke someone. Bank statements, check copies, email correspondence, text messages, and most importantly, recorded conversations. I had a habit of recording important family discussions on my phone originally because I wanted to remember all the details about holiday planning and family events. Now those recordings were about to serve a very different purpose. I called in sick to work and spent the day researching lawyers who specialized in family financial fraud. The third attorney I contacted, Rebecca Morrison, agreed to see me that afternoon. Rebecca's office was located in downtown in one of those glass buildings that screamed expensive legal representation. She was younger than I had expected, probably mid-30s, with sharp blue eyes and an even sharper business suit. "Tell me everything," she said after I had outlined the basic situation. I spent 2 hours laying out the entire deception. Rebecca took notes and occasionally asked clarifying questions, but mostly she just listened with an expression that grew increasingly grim. "Seraphina," she said when I finished, "what your family did to you constitutes several different crimes. Fraud, embezzlement, and potentially racketeering if we can prove this was an organized scheme." Racketeering? I had not expected the situation to be that serious. Creating a fake company to steal money from a family member over an extended period of time? Yes, that could definitely qualify. But here is what I need to know. Do you want to pursue criminal charges, civil recovery, or both? The question hung in the air between us. Criminal charges would mean potentially sending my family to prison. Civil recovery would mean getting my money back, but probably not seeing them face any serious consequences for what they had done. "I want everything," I heard myself say. "I want my money back, and I want them to face consequences for what they did." Rebecca smiled for the first time since I had walked into her office. "Good, because I specialize in cases exactly like this, and I have never lost one." She explained that we would need to move quickly and strategically. The first step would be freezing any assets connected to the fraudulent scheme, which meant getting a court order to prevent my family from moving or liquidating the investments they claimed contained my money. "There is one more thing," Rebecca said as I was preparing to leave. "Do you have somewhere safe to stay? Because once we file these papers, your family is going to be very angry, and people do unpredictable things when they are facing serious legal consequences." I had not considered that aspect. I have been living in the house this entire time. "That ends today," she said firmly. "Pack your essential belongings and find somewhere else to stay. If they have been willing to defraud you for 3 years, I do not trust them not to escalate their behavior once they realize you are fighting back." That evening, I returned to the house during what I knew would be my family's regular dinner hour. They always gathered at Eleanor and William's house on Wednesday evenings, which gave me time to pack without confronting anyone. Walking through the rooms I had believed were mine felt surreal. Every improvement I had made mocked me now. The crown molding I had installed in the living room. The bathroom I had completely renovated. The hardwood floors I had refinished myself. All of it had been free labor for my family's benefit. I packed quickly, but strategically. Clothes, important documents, family photos that actually belonged to me, and a few pieces of jewelry my grandmother had left specifically to me in her will. Everything else would have to wait. As I was loading the last box into my car, my phone rang. Marcus. Sarah, where are you? We came by the house to talk and all your stuff is gone. I moved out, I said simply. What do you mean you moved out? We need to discuss this situation like mature adults. There is nothing to discuss, Marcus. You all made it very clear last night that I have no say in what happens to the house or my money. Look, I think maybe we can work out some kind of arrangement. Maybe you could stay in the guest room when Magdalena moves in. The audacity was breathtaking. You want me to pay rent to live in a guest room in the house where I have been paying what I thought was a mortgage for 3 years. You are being unreasonable. I am being unreasonable. I laughed. Marcus, do you understand that what you all did to me is illegal? It is called fraud. There was a long pause. Sarah, you are not going to do something stupid, are you? Define stupid. You know what I mean. Do not make this into something it does not need to be. What it does not need to be, it is already something, Marcus. It is already theft and lies and betrayal. I did not make it into anything. Where are you staying? That is none of your business. Sarah, please, let us work this out as a family. We are not a family, I said, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. Families do not steal from each other. Families do not lie to each other for years. Families do not manipulate each other into providing free labor. You are going to regret this, Marcus said, and his tone had shifted from pleading to threatening. The only thing I regret is trusting any of you. I hung up and immediately called Rebecca to let her know my family was already trying to intimidate me into backing down. Perfect, she said. Document every contact attempt. Save every voicemail and text message. Intimidation of a victim is another charge we can add to the pile. That night, lying in a hotel bed and staring at the ceiling, I felt something I had not experienced in years' clarity. For the first time since I was 18 years old, I was making decisions for myself without considering what my family would think or how they would react. My phone buzzed constantly throughout the night. Magdalena sent a series of increasingly hysterical text messages ranging from fake sympathy to outright threats. Eleanor left voicemails talking about family loyalty and forgiveness. William sent a formal email demanding I return to the house immediately to discuss this misunderstanding. I saved everything and forwarded it all to Rebecca. The next morning, she called with an update. The emergency motion was granted. All assets connected to Hartwell Property Management are now frozen, and your family cannot access any of those funds pending the outcome of our investigation. How did they react? According to the process server, your father turned an interesting shade of purple and your mother fainted. Your brother demanded to speak to a supervisor and your sister threw her phone at the wall. For the first time in days, I smiled. So, they understand this is serious now. Oh, they understand. And Seraphina. They hired an attorney, a very expensive attorney, which tells me they know exactly how much trouble they are in. Good, I said. Let them spend their money on lawyers instead of enjoying the money they stole from me. There is one more development you should know about. The investigation into Hartwell Property Management revealed some interesting information. This is not the first time your family has done this. My blood went cold. What do you mean? There are records of at least 2 other similar arrangements over the past 15 years. Different victims, same basic scheme. We are still investigating, but it looks like your family has been running this con for a long time. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. This was not a one-time mistake or a misguided attempt to help me learn financial responsibility. This was a pattern of behavior, a systematic way of stealing money from people who trusted them. Who were the other victims? We are still working on identifying them, but the amounts involved suggest people close to the family. Relatives, maybe family friends. I thought about my cousin Miranda, who had lived with my parents for 2 years after college, and then suddenly moved across the country with no explanation. I thought about family friend Thomas, who had invested in one of my father's business ventures, and then stopped coming to family gatherings. Rebecca, I said slowly, I think I might know who some of the other victims are. The revelation that my family had been running this scheme for over a decade changed everything. This was not just about recovering my $54,000 anymore. This was about stopping a criminal enterprise that had destroyed multiple lives. I started with Miranda. My cousin had always been close to our family, but she had moved to Seattle abruptly 3 years ago and barely maintained contact since then. When I called her, she was hesitant to talk at first. Seraphina, I really do not want to get involved in family drama, she said when I explained why I was calling. Miranda, this is not family drama. This is about criminal fraud. I think what happened to me also happened to you. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. How much did they take from you? $54,000 over 3 years. They told me I was paying a mortgage, but the money went into a fake company they created. Oh my God, Miranda breathed. Seraphina, they took everything from me. Everything. Over the next hour, Miranda told me a story that made my situation look almost minor by comparison. When she had graduated college with a degree in engineering, my parents had offered to help her start her own consulting firm. They would provide startup capital and business guidance in exchange for her living with them and contributing to household expenses while she got established. For 2 years, Miranda had paid them $1,500 per month in living expenses, while also turning over 60% of her business income to what they claimed was a shared investment account that would eventually fund the expansion of her consulting practice. I was making good money, Miranda explained. Really good money. But I was living like I was broke because most of my income was going to them. They kept telling me it was temporary, that once the investment account reached a certain threshold, I would have enough capital to really expand the business. What happened? After 2 years, I asked to see the account statements. Uncle William told me there had been some market volatility and the investments were not performing as expected. Then he suggested I might be happier working for someone else instead of trying to run my own business. They sabotaged your business. Worse than that. When I insisted on seeing actual documentation, they told me the investment account had never existed. They said the money I had been contributing was simply my fair share of living expenses, and I had misunderstood the arrangement. I felt sick. How much did they steal from you? Over 2 years, close to $90,000. Miranda, why did you never say anything? Who was I going to tell? She asked, her voice breaking. They were my family, and they made me feel like I had been stupid to trust them, like it was my fault for not understanding the arrangement properly. Did you ever try to get the money back? I consulted with a lawyer, but Uncle William is very well connected in the legal community there. The lawyer I spoke to basically told me it would be my word against theirs, and since I had no documentation proving the investment account was supposed to exist, I probably would not win. Miranda, I have a lawyer now. A good one. And we have documentation of their pattern of behavior. Would you be willing to join the case? Another long silence. If I do this, they will destroy me. You know how they operate. They already destroyed you, I pointed out. They stole your money and drove you away from your own family. What is left for them to destroy? You are right, she said finally. Yes, I will join the case. And Seraphina. There might be others. What do you mean? Remember Thomas Whitmore? He used to come to all the family gatherings when we were kids. I did remember Thomas. He had been like an uncle to us, one of my father's oldest friends. but he had stopped coming around when I was in college, and no one ever talked about why. What happened to Thomas? I am not sure about all the details, but I know he invested a significant amount of money in one of Uncle William's business ventures about 10 years ago. Then suddenly he was not part of the family circle anymore. Do you still have his contact information? I do. But Seraphina, if Thomas was another victim, and if there are others we do not know about, we might be dealing with something much bigger than either of us realized. After I hung up with Miranda, I immediately called Rebecca to update her on this new information. Her reaction was swift and decisive. "We need to meet immediately," she said. "This case just became much more complex, and we need to adjust our strategy accordingly." 2 hours later, I was back in Rebecca's office, but this time I was not alone. She had called in 2 associates and a private investigator named David Park. "Based on what you have told me about Miranda and this Thomas person," Rebecca began, "we are potentially looking at a multi-victim long-term fraud scheme that could involve hundreds of thousands of dollars." David leaned forward in his chair. "I have been researching your father's business activities, and there are some red flags. Multiple LLC formations over the past 15 years, several of which were dissolved shortly after being created. That is often a sign of shell companies being used to hide financial activity." "So, what does this mean for my case?" I asked. "It means we are not just going after them for what they did to you," Rebecca explained. "We are potentially looking at a RICO case, Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. If we can prove this was an organized criminal enterprise, the penalties become much more severe." "How much more severe?" "Prison time. Significant prison time. And complete asset forfeiture, which means we can recover not just your money, but potentially everything they own." The weight of what Rebecca was saying settled over me. This had started as a quest to get back my $54,000 and had evolved into something that could destroy my family's entire financial empire. "There is something else," David said, consulting his notes. "Your sister Magdalena's wedding, the one she mentioned at dinner. I did some digging into her fiancé Derek's background." "What did you find?" "Derek Morrison works for a financial planning firm that has been under investigation by the SEC for the past 2 years. There are allegations of client fund misappropriation and securities fraud." I stared at him. "Morrison. Like Rebecca Morrison." Rebecca smiled grimly. "Derek is my younger brother. And yes, before you ask, that is exactly why I took your case. I have been waiting for an opportunity to get evidence against Derek's firm, and I suspect your family's activities might be connected to their investigation." The room fell silent as the implications of this revelation sank in. My sister was marrying into a family of financial criminals, and my attorney had personal reasons for wanting to bring down both families. "Is this a conflict of interest?" I asked. "Not legally," Rebecca replied. "Derek and I have been estranged for years because of his criminal activities. If anything, my personal knowledge of his methods will help us build a stronger case against your family." "So what happens now?" "Now we contact Miranda and get her formal statement. Then we track down Thomas and any other victims we can identify. We build a comprehensive case that shows the full scope of your family's criminal enterprise. And then we destroy them," Rebecca said simply. "Completely and permanently." As I left the meeting, my phone was buzzing with missed calls and text messages from various family members. They had clearly realized that I was not going to quietly disappear, and their attempts at contact were becoming increasingly desperate and threatening. But I also had a new message from an unknown number. "Seraphina, this is Thomas Whitmore. Miranda gave me your number and explained what happened to you. We need to talk. What your father did to me 10 years ago destroyed my entire life, and I have been waiting for an opportunity to make him pay for it. Call me when you can." I sat in my rental car in the parking garage and realized that what had started as a personal betrayal had evolved into something much larger. My family had not just stolen from me, they had built their entire lifestyle on a foundation of lies and theft that stretched back over a decade and had ruined multiple lives. But now, for the first time, their victims were connecting with each other. We were building our own network, our own alliance, and we had something my family did not expect: the truth documentation and a brilliant attorney who had personal reasons for wanting to see justice served. My phone rang. It was Magdalena. "Seraphina, you need to stop this nonsense immediately," she said without preamble. "You are embarrassing the entire family with these ridiculous accusations." "Ridiculous accusations," I laughed. "Magdalena, everything I have accused them of is documented and provable. You are being manipulated by people who want to hurt our family." "No, Magdalena. I am being helped by people who were hurt by our family. There is a big difference. If you do not drop this immediately, there will be consequences." "Are you threatening me?" "I am warning you. You have no idea what you are getting yourself into." "Actually, I know exactly what I'm getting myself into. The question is, do you know what you are getting yourself into by marrying Derek Morrison?" The line went silent. "That is right, Magdalena. I know all about your fiancé's business activities, and I know all about the SEC investigation. So maybe instead of threatening me, you should be asking yourself whether you really want to marry into another family of criminals." She hung up without saying another word. I called Thomas immediately. Thomas Whitmore turned out to be exactly what we needed: a victim with documentation resources and an unshakable desire for justice. When we met at a quiet cafe downtown, I barely recognized the broken man sitting across from me as the confident family friend from my childhood. "Your father destroyed everything I built over 30 years," Thomas said, his hands shaking slightly as he sipped his coffee. "My construction business, my reputation, my marriage, everything." He explained how William had approached him in 2014 with what seemed like a lucrative investment opportunity: a real estate development project that needed an experienced contractor and someone willing to invest in the venture. "I put in $400,000, Thomas said. "My entire life savings plus a loan against my business. William promised I would see a 300% return within 2 years. What happened? The development project never existed. The property William showed me belonged to someone else entirely. When I started asking questions about the delays, William told me there had been complications with zoning permits. Then it was environmental issues. Then it was problems with the investors. How long did this go on? 2 years of excuses. When I finally demanded my money back, William claimed I had never been an investor. I had been a contractor hired to do preliminary work on the project, and I had already been paid for my services. But you had documentation right. That is what I thought. But every document I signed had language that could be interpreted either way. William is very clever about how he structures these agreements. Thomas had lost not only his investment, but also his construction business when he could not repay the loan he had taken out. His wife had left him unable to cope with the financial devastation. He had been forced to declare bankruptcy and had spent the last 10 years rebuilding his life from nothing. "Why did you never pursue legal action?" I asked. I tried, but William had an alibi for every meeting we had ever had. He claimed I was a disgruntled contractor trying to extort money from him. Without clear documentation proving the investment arrangement, it became my word against his. "Thomas, we have clear documentation now, and we have multiple victims. Will you join our case?" "I have been waiting 10 years for this opportunity," he said firmly. "Yes, I will join your case." Over the next week, our alliance grew stronger. Rebecca had uncovered 2 additional victims through her investigation of William's shell companies: an elderly couple who had invested their retirement savings in one of his fake real estate ventures, and a young entrepreneur who had been convinced to turn over her startup capital for what she believed was a business incubation program. We were building an ironclad case with 6 victims and documentation spanning over a decade. Rebecca was confident we had enough evidence to bring both criminal and civil charges that would result in significant prison time and complete financial recovery for all victims. But then Marcus called with an unexpected proposition. "Sarah, I want to meet with you privately," he said. "Just you and me, no lawyers, no other family members. There are things you need to know about this situation." Against Rebecca's advice, I agreed to meet him. Something in his voice suggested he might be ready to turn against our parents, and if we could flip Marcus, our case would become absolutely unbeatable. We met at a neutral location, a busy restaurant where I felt safe, but we could still have a private conversation. Marcus looked terrible. He had dark circles under his eyes and had clearly lost weight since the dinner confrontation 2 weeks earlier. "Sarah, I need to tell you something," he began. "I never wanted any of this to happen to you." "Then why did you go along with it?" "Because I was scared," he admitted. "And because I thought if I played along, I could eventually convince them to make things right." "What do you mean you were scared?" Marcus looked around nervously before leaning closer. "There are things about our parents that you do not know. Things that would shock you." "Tell me." "The money they stole from you and the others, it is not just sitting in investment accounts. Most of it has been used to pay off debts from father's gambling addiction." I stared at him. Gambling addiction? He has been gambling for years. High-stakes poker games, sports betting, casino trips to Atlantic City. He owes money to some very dangerous people. "How much money?" "Last time I checked, close to $2 million. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Not only had my family stolen from me and others, but they had gambled away the stolen money and put themselves in debt to criminals. "Marcus, why are you telling me this now?" "Because I think I can help you get your money back, but I need you to drop the criminal charges against mother and father." "What?" "I have access to accounts they do not know I know about. Hidden accounts where they have been stashing money to pay off the gambling debts. If you drop the criminal case, I can get you your $54,000 plus interest." "What about the other victims?" "I can probably get them some money too, but not everything. And Sarah, if you pursue the criminal charges these people father owes money to, are going to come after the whole family, including you." "Are you threatening me?" "I am trying to protect you. Do you understand what happens to families who cannot pay their debts to these kinds of people?" I stared at my brother, trying to process what he was telling me. If he was being honest, then my parents were not just thieves. They were desperate thieves who had put the entire family in danger. "How do I know you are telling the truth?" Marcus pulled out his phone and showed me a series of text messages from unknown numbers. The messages were brief but terrifying. "Payment overdue. Time is running out. Your family will pay one way or another." "They started sending these messages after the court froze the assets," Marcus explained. "Father cannot make his usual payments now." "So what exactly are you proposing?" "I will give you the location of the hidden accounts. You and the other victims can recover what money is available. In exchange, you drop the criminal charges and everyone disappears from this quietly. And if I refuse, then we all go down together. The criminal case will take years to resolve, during which time these people are going to lose patience with waiting for their money. And Sarah, when people like this lose patience, families get hurt." I felt trapped. Everything Marcus was saying might be true, or it might be an elaborate manipulation designed to get me to drop the case just when we were about to win. "I need to think about this," I said. "You do not have time to think," Marcus replied urgently. "I received another message this morning. They are planning to take action within the next few days if they do not receive payment." "What kind of action?" "The kind that makes families disappear, Sarah. Permanently." I left the meeting feeling more confused and frightened than I had since this entire ordeal began. Was Marcus telling the truth about the danger, or was this just another layer of manipulation? Could I trust him to actually give me access to hidden accounts? Or would I drop the case only to discover he had been lying? But more importantly, if there really were dangerous people involved who might hurt innocent family members, did I have the right to continue pursuing criminal charges that could put everyone at risk? When I called Rebecca to update her on the meeting, her response was immediate and definitive. Seraphina, this is a classic intimidation tactic. They are trying to scare you into dropping a case they know they are going to lose. But what if Marcus is telling the truth about the gambling debts and the dangerous people? Then that is another crime we can add to the charges against your parents. Obtaining money through fraud to pay gambling debts is not a defense, it is an additional felony. But Rebecca, if there really are people who might hurt my family, your family should have thought about that before they started stealing money to pay gambling debts, she said coldly. Seraphina, if you drop this case now, you will never get justice. And more importantly, your family will continue stealing from other victims because they will know they can get away with it. What if Marcus is telling the truth about the hidden accounts? Hidden accounts that he claims to have access to, but has never mentioned before. Seraphina, think about this logically. If Marcus really had access to money that could pay back all the victims, why would he wait until now to mention it? Why would he not have used that money to help you when you first discovered the fraud? She was right, but I was still torn. The possibility that innocent people might get hurt because of my pursuit of justice was weighing heavily on my conscience. I need one more day to think about this, I told Rebecca. You have until tomorrow morning, she replied. But Seraphina, whatever decision you make it based on facts and evidence, not on fear and manipulation. That night alone in my hotel room, I stared at the ceiling and tried to decide whether my brother was offering me a lifeline or leading me into a trap. Everything I had learned about my family over the past few weeks suggested they were capable of any level of deception. But the text messages Marcus had shown me looked real, and the fear in his eyes had seemed genuine. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Your brother spoke to you today. Smart move. Take the deal or everyone suffers. I screenshotted the message and forwarded it to Rebecca immediately along with a text. I think Marcus was telling the truth. Her response came back within minutes. Pack your bags. You are checking out of that hotel right now and moving to a safe house. This case just became much more dangerous than any of us realized. The safe house was a modest apartment in a nondescript building 20 minutes outside the city. Rebecca had arranged for round-the-clock security, and she assured me that only she and David Park knew my location. But despite the protection, I felt more vulnerable than ever. The threatening message you received confirms that Marcus was telling at least part of the truth, Rebecca explained when she came to check on me the next morning. Your father does owe money to dangerous people, and they are using that debt to pressure your family. So what does that mean for our case? It means we accelerate everything. Instead of taking months to build the perfect case, we need to move within days before the situation becomes even more dangerous. But if we move too quickly, might we miss important evidence? Actually, the opposite is true. David's investigation over the past 48 hours has uncovered evidence that is even more damaging than what we already had. David spread a series of documents across the small dining table. Bank records, property deeds, and corporation papers, and what looked like personal correspondence. Your father has been much busier than we initially realized, David began. The gambling addiction Marcus mentioned is real, but it is only part of the story. William has been running multiple fraud schemes simultaneously for over 15 years. Multiple schemes. At least 7 different operations that we have identified so far. The fake mortgage scheme he used on you, fake investment opportunities like what he did to Thomas, a phony business incubation program, fraudulent property development deals, and at least 3 different Ponzi schemes targeting elderly investors. I stared at the documents spread before me. How much money are we talking about? Conservative estimate over $3 million stolen from at least 22 victims. The scope of my father's criminal enterprise was staggering. This was not a family patriarch who had made some questionable financial decisions. This was a professional criminal who had built his entire lifestyle on systematic theft. There is more, Rebecca said, pulling out another folder. We tracked down the elderly couple I mentioned earlier, the Hendersons. They were not just victims of one of your father's schemes. They were multiple victims. What do you mean? William convinced them to invest their retirement savings in a fake real estate development in 2016. When that money disappeared, he approached them again in 2018 with a different scheme, a phony charitable foundation that was supposedly helping homeless veterans. He stole from them twice. 3 times, actually. The third time was in 2020 when he convinced them to invest in cryptocurrency through a fake trading platform he created. I felt sick. How much did he steal from them in total? $470,000. Their entire life savings plus money they borrowed against their home. Where are they now? David's expression grew grim. Living in a 1-bedroom apartment in a subsidized housing complex. They lost their house, their savings, and their health insurance. Mrs. Henderson is diabetic and has been rationing her insulin because they cannot afford her medications. The human cost of my father's crimes was becoming clearer with each new revelation. These were not abstract financial transactions. These were real people whose lives had been destroyed by his greed. But here is where the story takes an interesting turn, Rebecca said. Yesterday we received a call from someone unexpected. Someone who wants to help us bring down your father. Who? Derek Morrison, your sister's fiancé. I stared at her in shock. Derek wants to help us. It turns out Derek has been cooperating with federal investigators for the past 6 months. His firm is indeed under investigation, but Derek has been providing evidence against his business partners in exchange for immunity. What does that have to do with our case? Derek has been recording his conversations with Magdalena for weeks. And Magdalena has been sharing details about your family's financial activities that she should not know about. Rebecca pulled out a digital recorder and placed it on the table. This conversation was recorded 3 days ago, right after the court froze your father's assets. She pressed play, and I heard my sister's voice clear and unmistakable. Derek, I need you to help me access some accounts that father does not know I know about. There is money hidden in offshore accounts that we can use to pay off his gambling debts. Derek's voice responded, Magdalena, if that money was obtained through fraud, I cannot help you access it. That would make me an accessory to money laundering. The money is not technically from fraud, Magdalena replied. It is from legitimate business investments that father made using capital he obtained through various business arrangements. You mean the money he stole from your sister and the others? I would not call it stealing. They made poor financial decisions, and father helped them avoid even worse consequences. The conversation continued for several more minutes with Magdalena revealing details about hidden accounts, offshore shell companies, and a safety deposit box containing documents that could prove the location of assets William had hidden from investigators. Derek got her to reveal the location of the safety deposit box and the offshore accounts. Rebecca explained when the recording ended. With this information, we can recover assets that William thought were completely hidden. Why is Derek helping us? 2 reasons. First, he genuinely wants to distance himself from criminal activity, and he knows that marrying Magdalena would connect him to your father's crimes. Second, he is hoping that cooperating with our investigation will strengthen his position with federal prosecutors. So Derek is breaking up with Magdalena. Already done. He ended the engagement yesterday and turned over all the recordings to us. I felt a complex mix of emotions. Relief that we had new evidence that could strengthen our case, but also a strange sadness for Magdalena, who was about to lose both her fiancé and her family's criminal empire. There is one more development, David said. The threatening messages your family has been receiving, they are not from dangerous criminals your father owes gambling debts to. What do you mean? The messages are being sent by Marcus. I stared at him in disbelief. Marcus is sending threatening messages to himself and to your parents. We traced the phone numbers and they all lead back to burner phones purchased by Marcus last month. But why would he do that? Rebecca leaned forward. because Marcus has been embezzling money from your father's criminal operations for over 2 years. He has been skimming cash from the various schemes and depositing it in his own secret accounts. How much money? Close to $600,000. The betrayal cut deep. Marcus had not been trying to protect me or the family. He had been trying to protect his own criminal activity. The story about gambling debts and dangerous people had been a complete fabrication designed to get me to drop the case before investigators discovered his own crimes. Marcus is the one who has been funding the lifestyle you all thought your parents were paying for, David explained. The expensive cars, the lavish vacations, the designer clothes, that was all paid for with money Marcus stole from his father's victims. So the hidden accounts Marcus claimed he could access, those are real, but they contain money he stole, not money William hid. Marcus was planning to offer you a small portion of his stolen money in exchange for dropping the case, which would have allowed him to keep the rest and avoid prosecution. I sat back in my chair, trying to process the full scope of the betrayal. Not only had my parents been stealing from me and others for years, but Marcus had been stealing from the people my parents had already stolen from. And when I started fighting back, he had tried to manipulate me into dropping the case by creating a fake threat scenario. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we have everything we need to destroy all of them," Rebecca said with satisfaction. "William for running multiple fraud schemes over 15 years. Eleanor for being an active participant in several of the operations. Marcus for embezzlement and obstruction of justice. And Magdalena for money laundering and conspiracy. All of them. All of them. With Derek's recordings, the financial evidence David uncovered, and the testimony from multiple victims, we have enough evidence to send your entire family to prison for decades. And the money. We can recover everything. The offshore accounts, the hidden assets, Marcus's stolen money, even the house you have been living in. Every penny they stole, plus interest and penalties. What about the other victims? Full recovery for everyone. The Hendersons will get their $470,000 back. Thomas will recover his $400,000. Miranda will get her $90,000. Everyone will be made whole." For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like we were finally going to win. But the victory felt hollow, knowing that achieving justice would require destroying the people who had raised me, even if they deserved everything that was coming to them. "Seraphina," Rebecca said gently, "I know this is difficult because they are your family. But you need to remember that they chose to commit these crimes. They chose to steal from you and from innocent people. They chose to destroy lives for their own financial gain. You are not responsible for the consequences of their choices." She was right, but that did not make it easier to accept that my parents and siblings would soon be facing prison sentences that would effectively end their lives as they knew them. When do we move forward with everything? Tomorrow morning, we file all the criminal charges simultaneously, execute search warrants on all their properties, and freeze every asset they have ever owned. Will I have to testify? Yes, but you will not be alone. We have 6 other victims ready to testify, plus Derek's cooperation, and thousands of pages of documentary evidence. Your family's criminal enterprise is about to come to a complete and permanent end. The day of reckoning arrived with surprising calm. I woke up in the safe house feeling more peaceful than I had in months, knowing that justice was finally about to be served. By 10 in the morning, everything was in motion. Federal agents were executing search warrants at my parents' house, Marcus's apartment, and Magdalena's condo simultaneously. Rebecca called to give me updates as events unfolded. "Your father tried to run," she reported with obvious satisfaction. "He was arrested at the airport trying to board a flight to the Cayman Islands with 2 suitcases full of cash." "How much cash?" $230,000. All of it in small bills probably skimmed from recent victims. Eleanor had been arrested at home, where agents found detailed records of every fraudulent transaction dating back 16 years. She had been keeping meticulous books of their criminal activities, apparently believing that good organization would somehow protect them from prosecution. Marcus had been taken into custody at his office, where he broke down completely and confessed to everything within minutes of being read his rights. The federal agents did not even have to interrogate him. He volunteered information about crimes they had not even discovered yet. Magdalena's arrest was the most dramatic. She had barricaded herself in her condo and refused to come out until agents threatened to break down the door. When they finally arrested her, she was found trying to flush documents down the toilet, documents that turned out to be additional evidence of the offshore money laundering operation. "It is over, Seraphina," Rebecca told me when she arrived at the safe house that afternoon. "All 4 of them are in federal custody and they will not be getting bail. The evidence is so overwhelming that their attorneys are already talking about plea agreements." "What kind of sentences are they looking at?" "William is facing up to 40 years. Eleanor could get 25 years. Marcus is looking at 15 years and Magdalena could receive 10 years. Those are the minimum sentences if they plead guilty. If they go to trial and lose, the sentences could be much longer." The scope of the consequences was staggering. My entire family would likely spend the rest of their lives in prison for crimes they had committed against people who trusted them. "What about asset recovery?" "Better than we hoped. The offshore accounts contained over $2 million. Marcus's hidden accounts had another $600,000. We recovered jewelry, artwork, and collectibles worth at least $300,000, plus the house, which is valued at $450,000. So there is enough money to compensate all the victims. Every victim will receive full restitution plus interest and penalty payments. Some victims will actually receive more money than they lost because of the interest calculations." Over the following weeks, I watched my family's criminal empire collapse completely. The local newspaper ran a series of articles about the Hartwell family fraud ring that detailed the full scope of their crimes. The stories included interviews with victims whose lives had been devastated by my family's greed. Reading about Mrs. Henderson rationing her insulin because she could not afford medication broke my heart. Learning about the young entrepreneur who had attempted suicide after losing her startup capital to one of my father's schemes made me physically sick. Understanding the full human cost of my family's crimes made it clear that justice was not just deserved, it was essential. But the most surprising development came from the victim community that had formed around our shared experiences. Thomas, Miranda, the Hendersons, and the other victims had begun meeting regularly to support each other through the legal process. What started as a group of people united by trauma had evolved into something that felt like a real family. "We should stay in touch after all this is over," Miranda said during one of our group meetings. "We have been through something together that most people could never understand." Thomas nodded. "You know, I never had children of my own, but this group feels more like family to me than my biological relatives ever did." Mrs. Henderson reached over and patted my hand. "Seraphina, dear, you saved all of our lives by having the courage to fight back. Without you, we would have never recovered our money, and your father would have continued destroying other families." "I just did what anyone would have done," I replied. "No," she said firmly. "Most people would have taken Marcus's deal and walked away quietly. You chose to fight for justice, not just for yourself, but for all of us. That takes real courage." 6 months after my family's arrest, I made a decision that would have seemed impossible when this journey began. I used my recovered money, plus the additional penalty payments, to purchase a large house in a quiet neighborhood, a house big enough for multiple people to live comfortably. Thomas moved into the guest house behind the main property after his lease expired. Miranda relocated from Seattle and took the apartment above the garage while she rebuilt her consulting business. The Hendersons moved into the first-floor master suite when their subsidized housing became too difficult for Mrs. Henderson to navigate with her mobility issues. What we created was not a traditional family, but it was something better. A chosen family built on mutual support, shared experiences, and genuine care for each other's well-being. We had Sunday dinners together, celebrated holidays as a group, and supported each other through both good times and difficult moments. Thomas taught me woodworking skills and helped me build raised garden beds in the backyard. Miranda used her engineering expertise to help me install a solar panel system that made the house completely energy independent. Mrs. Henderson taught me her grandmother's recipes, and Mr. Henderson shared stories from his military service that helped me understand the value of fighting for what is right. My biological family eventually pleaded guilty to all charges. William received 35 years in prison. Eleanor got 20 years. Marcus received 12 years, and Magdalena was sentenced to 8 years. Their plea agreements required them to cooperate fully with ongoing investigations into other potential victims, and their testimonies led to the discovery of 3 additional victims who received full restitution. I visited none of them in prison. The people who had raised me were strangers to me now, and I had no desire to maintain relationships with individuals who had built their lives on systematic cruelty toward innocent people. But the house I shared with my chosen family became a place of healing and growth for all of us. We hosted other victims of financial fraud who needed support and guidance. We volunteered with organizations that helped elderly people avoid investment scams. We turned our shared trauma into a force for helping others avoid similar experiences. 2 years after my family's conviction, I received a letter from Magdalena in prison. She had written to apologize and to ask for forgiveness. The letter was several pages long and detailed her regret for participating in the family's crimes. I read it once and then threw it away without responding. Forgiveness might come eventually, but it would not come because she asked for it from prison after being caught and convicted. True remorse would have meant confessing before being arrested, cooperating with victims instead of trying to intimidate them, and choosing honesty over continued deception. My chosen family and I often talked about the lessons we learned from our experiences with financial fraud. Trust, we agreed, should be earned through consistent actions over time, not assumed because of shared genetics or claimed relationships. Love should be demonstrated through support and honesty, not through manipulation and control. Most importantly, we learned that families are not defined by blood relationships or legal documents. Real families are formed by people who choose to show up for each other, who prioritize each other's well-being, and who build their relationships on foundations of honesty and mutual respect. Standing in my garden on a Sunday evening, watching Thomas teach Miranda how to prune roses, while the Hendersons sat on the porch sharing stories and laughing together, I realized that losing my biological family had been the greatest gift I could have received. It forced me to discover what real family actually means and to build relationships based on choice rather than obligation. The house I thought I was buying 3 years ago had been taken from me through lies and manipulation. But the home I built with my chosen family was something no one could ever steal, because it was founded on truth, mutual support, and the kind of love that people choose to give, rather than love that is demanded or assumed. I want to ask all of you watching this story, have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what you knew was right? Sometimes the people we are supposed to trust the most are the ones who hurt us the deepest. But that does not mean we have to accept their behavior or protect them from consequences. If my story has resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear that they deserve better than manipulation and lies. Hit that like button if you believe that justice is worth fighting for even when it is painful. Subscribe for more stories about finding strength in impossible situations and building the life you deserve. And remember, the family that matters most is the one that chooses to love and support you unconditionally. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and I hope my experience helps you trust yourself enough to fight for the justice and respect you deserve.